This is Healing Our Land's collaboration with the African American Diabetes Association. Good morning, Brother Eric. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Good morning. I was looking forward to this.
Amen.
I've just been seeing what was going on with AADA and things that are coming forward. I'm excited about our workshop coming up this month as well. So we got a great broadcast today. And our topic today is type 1 versus type 2, because it's very important to know the difference between the two, because they have different, symptoms, they have different, results and healthcare and stuff like that. And so I'm really excited to, for our listeners to meet our guest today, a very special guest. And our guest today is Dr. Felisa DeRose. She is a global diabetes patient advocate and director of content strategy at Q&A. She began blogging almost immediately after being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2011. A year later, she founded Black Diabetic Info, a website dedicated to increasing awareness of cultural competent diabetes information from around the African diaspora. In 2019, after becoming extremely ill, she learned that she had been misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes for 8 years and finally given the correct diagnosis, latent autoimmune diabetes in adult, a form of type 1 diabetes.
Wow. I understand that in 2023, Felicia published a children's book, Diabetes Helpers, with her daughter, the first of its kind. The book honors children who have loved ones with diabetes. She has graced the cover of Health Monitor magazine and was featured in Diabetic Living, Diabetes Focus, and other publications. Her passion for diabetes lifestyle advocacy can be seen in her YouTube vlogs, social media posts, in-person workshops, published essays, and keynote speeches that she has given in 5 countries. She enjoys traveling and writing. Her flash fiction story, The Daily News Blues, highlights the intersectionality of COVID-19 pandemic, mental health, and diabetes. In her book chapter, Laughing to Keep from Dying, Black Americans with Diabetes in Sitcoms and Comedies. Oh, Lord Jesus. Elucidates, thank you, the impact of diabetes stigma.
Considered one of the most prolific writers on the representation of diabetes in African American literature, builds community through storytelling and drawings, on a PhD in English literature from Pennsylvania State University. Professor, her Fulbright scholar expertise and her own experiences living with diabetes has an inspiration for all. You can follow her on Instagram at Black Diabetic Info. You can find her book, her children's book, at Barnes & Nobles and on Amazon.com. And without further ado, I would like to bring on and thank Dr. Felisa DeRose, who is actually on the West Coast, so it's about 4-something in the morning there. So thank you for your due diligence, and thank you for being on, Doctor.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, for the most part, during the intro, all I heard was, if Jesus can't do it, nobody can. So the song was blasting in my ear. And I'm like, I think they're reading my bio, but I'm over here having a praise team. So I do want to say thank you so much for having me on this morning. Yes, I am in San Diego, so it's like 5 in the morning, but I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So why don't in your bio we talked about the misdiagnoses, and how important is it that the diagnoses of one get it right? Because you lived 8 years as believing that you were type 2, then coming to find out you're type 1, if you would have known earlier about being a type 1, is the care different?
Yeah, the care is different because with type 1 diabetes, it is an autoimmune condition. And I'm going to explain it this way. Now that there's this incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock, I usually do that. But I'm going to use David and Goliath for this one. I'm going to switch it up a little bit for praise and gospel radio. So, when you are a person that has type 1 diabetes, I have latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And it's very important for me to let people know that I have LADA. LADA stands for latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, because people who have LADA have a story. In essence, LADA and type 1 are the same condition. It means that your pancreas has beta cells. Everyone has a pancreas, and it produces insulin through the beta cells. But when you have type 1, you have an autoimmune condition. And what happens is your beta cells are like Goliath, and they are making insulin. And then you have autoimmune condition that's like David, and it is trying to slay them down to stop producing insulin for whatever reason. We do not know the cause. Mm-hmm. But what happens is the people are not able to get the insulin because the body has decided to attack the insulin-producing beta cells. And the difference between a person with type 1 and a person with LADA is that those of us who have LADA have had a slow progression to become 100% dependent on getting our insulin externally. Mm-hmm. So I get insulin from an insulin pump now. I used to do insulin needles, and because my body can't produce the insulin and I have to purchase it at a local pharmacy, it is a different condition than type 2. Now, I have to say this. Breaking news as of this Friday, the FDA has approved the first clinical trial that will allow beta cells to be manufactured in a lab and put in a human pancreas inside a capsule so the person does not have to take suppressive medicine.
Wow.
So this is so exciting. Mm-hmm. And again, if you do not know that you have type 1, you wouldn't know. So I'm going to back up and just share my story.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed with diabetes at 31 years old. I had the classic symptoms, and it's important for people to know what are the classic symptoms of having high blood sugar. Frequent urination, extreme thirst, blurred vision, fatigue. And when I say fatigue, I mean so tired that I wanted to use the word weary, but I felt I was too young. You know how older people, they be like, oh, I'm weary. I just was like, at 31, I shouldn't be saying weary, But it was that level of tiredness that I was feeling. And eventually, I passed out in my bathtub. I went into a coma. And when I got to the emergency room, they simply asked how long had I had diabetes. That was the first time I heard that, even though I had gone to a primary care physician 2 times. And while I was there, they didn't know what type of diabetes I had because it was an emergency situation that is typical for people with type 1 diabetes. So I do want to say that the quick, sudden onset of high blood sugar, it often happens with people with type 1. The slow progression of high blood sugar is kind of associated with people with type 2. So I was diagnosed type 2. I lived that way for 8 years. And this is what I want people to be aware of. If you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and you are doing your best, I mean, you are taking the medication as prescribed, you are watching your carb intake, you are exercising, you are doing all that you can, and your blood sugar is still high, your blood sugar is still all over the place, please, please, please ask to be checked for type 1 antibodies. Because if you have type 1, there is nothing you can do that is going to make your body produce the insulin. You have an autoimmune condition that is attacking your beta cells. And what they like to do with us, now I'm just going to put it on out there like that. They like to say, we don't like to take care of our sugar diabetes. We don't want to listen. We're non-compliant. I mean, you start doing these negative things, saying these negative things about people, and we start feeling it. I have to tell you, I was out there running 5K races once a month, eating low carb. My blood sugar was still going up. And my doctor, go ahead.
This past week, I actually worked a convention and with chronic kidney disease, and they were talking about the correlation between kidney disease and diabetes. And at one of the panels, I walked into the room and I thought I missed the room because it looked like a muscle builders competition. And I'm just like, wait a minute, I was so confused. I'm like, what, and then come to find out that the bodybuilding industry actually has a group that of bodybuilders who have diabetes. So for all those people that think because you look like Mr. Olympia that you couldn't have diabetes, you're totally wrong. And I say that to those who are listening who are incarcerated because the food inside prisons aren't good. So you're spending all your time in the gym and you're looking like Hercules, but you still need to get yourself checked because the food you're eating is not the correct food that you should be eating, even if you are working out.
Yes, I agree. And I was just going to say that my doctor was just increasing my medication. Rather than testing me for an autoimmune condition, they were just, take more pills. You're on 500 grams of metformin. Now take it in the morning and the night. So I'm at 1,000 a day. Then take 750. Then take 1,000. I was just like, because I had heard of latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, I asked my endocrinologist, can you test me for type 1 diabetes, please? And I got told no. I asked again, can you test me for type 1 diabetes? I got told no. I got a second opinion. That second opinion said no. And eventually, I ended up in diabetes ketoacidosis, which is it could be deadly. I ended up in that condition again. And I asked my gynecologist, and she tested me. So that's how I found out that I have type 1 diabetes.
So you had to go through your gynecologist to get tested for diabetes?
That is correct.
That is insane. But I thank you for your persistence. And I think that's what people, if you're feeling the symptoms and you should know your body, and you keep getting the same thing. You've been asked, ask your doctor to test and they say no, go to a different doctor. Don't take the no for an answer.
And I think they're because the common image of a person with type 2 diabetes right now in our society is a person that's black or brown, living with obesity, and probably from a urban or a poor neighborhood. And what's crazy is that even though I'm a woman with a PhD, that couldn't supersede me being a black woman who lives with obesity, and so I was associated with type 2. It took me asking someone who is not in the diabetes space, so somebody who is not inundated with type 2, happens to black, brown people with obesity, to see me And the person that I was simply asking for a test. Can you just do this test to make sure that I'm being treated for the right condition? And it turns out for 8 years I was not treated for the right condition.
Wow. So you keep saying this, getting tested. What does this test entail for those that, are feeling the symptoms and are, weary of doctors and like, what's this test? So exactly what are they doing when they test you for the diabetes?
Okay, so if you have diabetes, every 3 months, you should be getting your A1C tested. And what that visit is, you go to your doctor. It could be a specialist, an endocrinologist. Some people see primary care physicians for their diabetes care. But whomever that physician is that you go, they do your weight, they do your blood pressure, they run a panel. They simply draw a vial of blood. They get from that vial of blood your A1C, they get your cholesterol, and all you have to do is say, hey, can you just add the antibody test to that? Which is why I didn't understand why it was a big problem. Because I'm going there every day not every day, but every 3 months for them to draw blood. So they're already getting, a vial of blood for these things. And all the physician needed to do was just check the box for type 1 antibodies. So there are about 4 to 5 type 1 antibodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm positive for 2. That's pretty much the diagnosis. Like if you have 2 of these antibodies present, you have type 1. Like your pancreas, the beta cells in your pancreas are literally under attack. And people with type 2 do not have the presence of these antibodies. So their body is fully able to produce insulin. Sometimes there is the presence of insulin resistance, so the body can produce insulin, but it doesn't use it properly. Or sometimes, as we age, the pancreas just produces less insulin.
Mm-hmm.
So it is literally just a simple blood test that, like I said, can be done in your routine care when you go every 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, with regard to folks who are incarcerated. Again, we talk about, this. So you're going to primary care, and with all that the resources that you had available, and even advocating for yourself to be able to be tested, had to be persistent to actually get that test done. And so for people who are incarcerated, who maybe don't have, feel like they really have the capacity to advocate for themselves, what would you suggest in terms of them being able to, their rights, I guess, as a person who is incarcerated, what they could do to push to make sure that their, diabetes is being diagnosed properly and treated?
What I would say is look at what people are saying about people with type 2 diabetes. Now, I want to say, as a person with diabetes, I'm one of those people where I feel like all people with diabetes have common threads. But in this case of me differentiating between type 1 and type 2, it is a simple test. And physicians need to know that they are treating the right condition. And people who are living with diabetes need to know that they have the right condition. And if you read things about people with type 2 diabetes and it just doesn't quite fit you, I would start marking those things down. Because what I needed to present to my endocrinologist, who still didn't listen to me, but I needed to present them with a case. So, for example, people with type 2 diabetes, it tends to happen like later in life, their 40s, their 50s. For me, I was 30. Latent autoimmune diabetes happens around the age of 30. They have kind of gotten that down to a scientific fact. But around the age of 30 is when people get louder. So if you were diagnosed around the age of 30, mark that down. Also, I'm the only person in my family with diabetes. I mean, I took my family tree and I shook that thing down, round, upside down, however you could. Because when I was reading things about type 2, they were saying, like, genetic and, like, oh, it runs in the family and all of that. And then everybody's looking at me like, huh? Like, my mom and my dad, they both have 7 siblings. So my parents come from families of 8, both of them. They don't have diabetes. None of their siblings have diabetes. Their children's children, like, so my first cousins, like, I'm by myself. So if you are feeling alone in your diagnosis, mark that down. Also, if you're doing everything the physician says, give yourself 3 months and just do it. You know, sometimes we have fatigue. Sometimes we don't want to take them pills. Sometimes we don't want to give shots. Sometimes we just do what the people say for a couple months and see if that makes a change. And if it doesn't make a change, if your blood sugar is still high, I would say you're building a case as to why they need to test you for type 1 diabetes. I can't stress enough, when you are giving it all you got and those results are saying the difference, just how you feel like a failure. How you feel like saying, you know what, why am I eating salad when somebody else is eating potato chips? I could be eating potato chips and enjoying my life. Right? Like,
so you brought up another misnomer that when you talked about that, how no one else in your family has diabetes, because there's this huge thing that people think that diabetes is solely inherited.
Yeah, they do. I even had a physician tell me someone in my family's lying. And I was like, ma'am, you don't even know me. I'm trying to say, this was like my first clue when I read like this genetic link, like someone in your family has diabetes, and I was like, no one in my family has diabetes. And I shared this with the physician very early on in my diagnosis. And she goes, you know, when people have conditions, they'll lie about it and they won't tell the family. So basically, she so believed that I had type 2 and that someone had diabetes in my family, that it meant someone in my family was lying.
You know, it's funny how the medical professionals, you know, treat black people when they go in. Because I go in, when I go in for like anything, any type of illness, and they do that query, and they ask you if you ever smoked, if you ever did drugs, if you ever drink alcohol, I can say no to all 3 of those and say never, and they give me this look like, again, like you're lying. And because they'll try to rephrase it to get a different answer. You know, you've never done this over the counter? No drugs, okay? No drugs, right? And they're just looking at me like, you know. But again, if I was a Caucasian guy or somebody else, they would automatically believe it. Okay, yeah, you know. But it's impossible.
Yep, and that's how it is too when you're living with obesity. You know, the fact that I am living with obesity, even though I have shed about 70, 80 pounds. And have kept it off for like a decade. Wow. When people see me, they still see, you know, a little above average plus size woman. And so what they associate that with is laziness. They don't associate that with the fact that I love doing 5K races. And I will walk somebody down in a minute. Like, I love walking. That is where me and God relate through walks. And so I'm constantly walking. So my heart is in great health. And so when people see me, they're like, oh, do you exercise? Yes. How often? Just about every day. are you sure? And it's like, yeah, I just told you that. Yeah, I just said that. So I experienced that too. People have to listen. And I just have to say, if anything feels weird about your body, weird about the diagnosis you've been given, please don't give up. Please, please, please do not give up. Because I'm going to tell you all something. I would not be here today if I had not gotten the right diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Because they still would have been treating me for the wrong condition. And then they would have told me that I'm a bad diabetic who isn't compliant and therefore I need insulin.
Mm-hmm.
That's also something that is a negative harm. They make it seem as though insulin is a bad thing.
Right.
Everybody is insulin dependent.
Mm-hmm.
We all need insulin. Everybody. God made our bodies to make insulin.
Mm-hmm.
So insulin is not a bad thing. If you need the insulin, take the insulin because God knows you could very well have an autoimmune condition where you need it externally,
mm-hmm.
but you haven't been diagnosed with it. And I'm so thankful that I never, in those 8 years when I was misdiagnosed, I never saw insulin as a bad thing. Because can you imagine if I had accepted that insulin was a bad thing, and now, I mean, I need it morning, noon, and night. I have a shirt that says every day, I need God and insulin. that is just how I am. So we have to take care of our mind. Mm-hmm. That's one thing about people with diabetes. There's a strong connection between depression and diabetes because we're dealing with this thing every day.
Right.
We're waking up in the morning, getting our blood sugar checked. We're checking blood sugar before we eat. We're checking blood sugar at bedtime. And so it weighs on you. It really does. And mm-hmm. sometimes you feel like don't nobody understand. So we have to protect our emotions and our mind and our heart and our feelings about ourselves. Positive talk. That's also a part of managing the condition. Is managing our mind.
Mm-hmm. So you are listening to Healing Our Land broadcast in collaboration with the African American Diabetes Association. We're talking about blacks and diabetics in Boston. And with us is Dr. Felissa DeRose, who has her PhD in literature, but has also started her own blog and website about black diabetes information. If you have any questions, you want to join the conversation, you want to give our guest a comment or ask her a question, give us a call at 617-282-0685. Again, that's 617-282-0685. And you can also join us via Facebook page, through Pastor Franklin Hobbs' Facebook page. I don't know if we have anyone on there that's commenting or anything, but if you want to send us a message through there, we'll read it here as well. So, continuing with our conversation, let's say you're up in age and you find out very late in that up in age that you have diabetes. What do you say to that person who just feels like the end of the world just happened?
The first thing I want to say to that person is, yes, your world is going to change. And I say that because when I was diagnosed, I was trying to figure out how to still keep my life as normal. And the reality is it changes. Mm-hmm. But your life also changed when you started going to school. Your life also changed when you had your first partner. You know what I mean? Like, changes happen. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say you have to embrace the change. One thing I didn't mention so far, and that is 50%, so about half, literally half the people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes are adults. Mm-hmm. So we like to think of it as juvenile diabetes, diabetes for the kids. I just want to say half the people are adults. That's important because in my talk, I once did a talk at a church. I did a diabetes workshop, and a woman in her late 60s heard my misdiagnosis story, went and asked her doctor to test her for type 1 diabetes, and sure enough, she was 60-something years old, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Now, because she's an older black woman, they just gave her the type 2 diagnosis. But because she had heard and she asked, so, she was able to get on technology. She got an insulin pump like I do, which I can talk about technology after answering this question if you like. So the first thing I would say is just embrace change. The second thing I would say is also embrace technology. I'll just roll it into that. So pricking your finger. We have seen people do this, family reunions, church services, wherever, when someone gets their finger pricked. When you have diabetes, you have to do this constantly. And it hurts sometimes, and some people don't like to do it because now you're squeezing blood out your finger and you're putting it on one of those test strips to get a number. Well, they now have CGMs that people wear on their arm or wear on their stomach. This technology lasts for 10 days. It's one prick in your skin, and you can know your blood sugar at any time of the day. And I say that to say, just like technology with cars, technology with television, technology with cell phones, they have made life better for a lot of people. And when it comes to diabetes, wearing that device on your shoulder, on your stomach, it makes managing diabetes easier. And I know some of us don't want to do technology. Do you remember when you could order online for the first time, like way back in the day?
Right. Yep.
I remember telling my best friend, I ain't never putting my credit card on the internet.
Right.
Now when I tell you it is automatically in there, I don't have to put it in. I just press that button on Amazon.com. It is a mess. So they have my credit card, they have everything, right? So I know what it's like to kind of be hesitant on technology advances. But I have to say with this one, it's a good thing. So I would say fight for access to the technology, because you don't want to have to prick your finger 5 times a day when you don't have to. And if you are on Medicaid Plan D, Medicare, if you're on Medicare Plan D, the government, I think it was 2 years ago, made access to the CGM technology available for everybody on the Medicare plan. So if you are older and you have that, you have access to it. So you don't have to prick your finger 3, 4, 5 times a day.
Right. So when you're living with diabetes and you also have a family, so you're not going through it alone, and I understand that you have a daughter. And this was probably the reason for writing the book, but how do you explain to a child what's going on with you?
So my daughter is 7 years old, and I noticed her taking my CGM reader and waving it over her arm. So if you have the Libre, you have a reader and you wave it over your arm to get your reading. So you don't prick your finger, you just like wave it. And so at 3 years old, she picked up my device, she waved her own arm, which clearly didn't have a device in it. And then she looks at it and she smiles as if she's gotten a good blood sugar. And so what I realized is like, oh snap, she's watching me.
Absolutely.
That diabetes is a part of her world, which, like I've shared with you, I'm the only person in my family, so it was never a part of my world, right?
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, it gave me a new perspective. Because I have to say, I was the kind of person that didn't really tell people about my condition. I didn't want people to, in my business. I didn't want people to worry. I didn't want people to ask. I wanted to go over to my aunt's house, who's known to make the best sweet potato pie in the family, and I love sweet potato pie. I wanted to be able to go over to Aunt May's house and have me a slice of her pie and not hear, can you eat that? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know how people do. And so I realized that, I have to talk about this, my condition with my daughter. So I immediately looked for books on how to explain diabetes to a child, and I couldn't find it. And my record shows when I can't find something, I create it.
Right.
I started my website, Black Diabetic Info, a year after my diagnosis because I was looking for diabetes information that came from a Black perspective, that talks about eating collard greens, that talks about eating grits, that talks about eating Hop and John. And I couldn't find it. And so I created it. And it was the same with my book, Diabetes Helpers, that just came out this year. It is the first tool that allows adults to talk about type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and even latent autoimmune diabetes in adults with children. I allow the adult to go as in-depth or as surface as they see fit with their child. Right? My daughter's 7 now. She can handle a little bit more than she could at 5.
Right.
So I wrote the book for that elementary school age where a parent or aunt or grandma, whomever, can say, here's a book, the Diabetes Helpers, and it shows how the kids are able to help. So my daughter, when my blood sugar is low, I'm like, Jelana, give me juice. She knows, run to the refrigerator. The bottom drawer on the right side is full of mommy's juice. She has the bottom drawer on the left side. So the bottom drawer on the right side is my juice. She brings it to me, and then that's it. I have to wait 15 minutes for my blood sugar to increase, but I don't involve her in that. She just knows, bring me juice and then go back playing, doing whatever you're doing. So it's important for the family to know. And I'm going to tell you this, another reason why it's important for your family to know, and even people around you to know, if you take insulin and your blood sugar drops because you have too much insulin in your system, you behave differently. My cognitive skills slow down. I'm not able to speak as fast or as clearly. I'm not able to process and think as fast as clearly. And I have a look. I just look different. Like my blood sugar is low. Like I'm on the verge of passing out. And people around you need to know your signs and symptoms. Matter of fact, like I said, I'm in San Diego and I got here 2 days ago. Blood sugar was dropping in the airport. I got orange juice out of a machine, and I couldn't peel the plastic because my dexterity, like my grip, I was losing it. So I asked this lady, I said, excuse me, my blood sugar is dropping and I can't open this. I'll open this orange juice. Can you open it for me? She had like a bandage on her thumb and she was like, oh, my fingers are like messed up or whatever. And I was like, dear God, please help me. Please help me. So thank God that there was a man who is nosy and is people watching, because that's me. I love to people watch. Because he looks over at me and I'm sure I look like I'm on the verge of passing out on this floor, but I need to make my connecting flight. Like now they are already boarding. And he looked and I just shook my head, yes, like, please come help me.
Right.
And he said, I got you, right? And he gets up and he opens it and I drink the juice and I'm like, thank you. So my point is, the people around you need to know when you have an emergency situation.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell someone. You have to, especially because if your blood sugar gets really low and you do pass out, you need emergency glucagon.
Mm-hmm.
Juice and candy is not going to do it. You have to have emergency glucagon. And the thing about that is someone has to give it to you.
Right. So when I was incarcerated, I've told this story before, but it was my first time ever being incarcerated, and I was so depressed and stuff like that. But I was too cowardice to try to kill myself the normal way people would do in jail, slit your wrists or jump off the balcony or something like that. So I said, you know what, I'm diabetic. I'll let diabetes kill me. So I stopped taking everything. I wouldn't go get pricked. I wouldn't do anything. So I'm in meal line one time, and I passed out, right? And I come to hearing them say, "Oh my God, he passed out," and me on the floor. I'm like, "Who?" You know. So I'm like all this logic and stuff like that. But I say that to say this: that the correctional officers on the on your tier have no idea what to do. They literally have to call down to the medical people. They have to get the stuff, get on the elevator, come all the way to where you are, and stuff to get you, your insulin shot, or to come and get you to take you down to the HSU, the Health Services Unit. And so, as part of our project on here is working with incarcerated who either have diabetes or went in with diabetes or came out with diabetes, is to help bring to light, that part of the healthcare unit that is really disservicing those people with diabetes. And I believe we have a phone call, so let's take that.
Oh, nice.
Caller, go ahead.
Hi, yes, this is Leon Rock. How you doing today?
Good.
Good. You have an amazing conversation and an amazing story on how you've survived and grown from the challenge of diabetes. Can you share with the audience what advocacy or self-advocacy they should do if they find out that they're pre-diabetic or in fact diabetic and the doctors or the nurses or the endocrinologist is not doing the right thing? What should people on average do?
Okay. Well, I first want to say thank you for calling in and recognizing my story and my journey. The first thing I have to say is you got to love yourself. And part of where my advocacy started was because when I was diagnosed, I passed out in that bathtub and I was gone. I mean, I was living alone. No one was going to find me anytime soon. But I woke up. And when I woke up, I knew that I woke up for a purpose. And then 61 days later, I was on my way home to leaving the grocery store. And I know it was God, my great-grandfather, my grandmother, every relative in the heavens to tell me to turn into a store and not go home. And I was obedient. And after 20 minutes, I felt like an idiot. I was like, girl, you just turned into this store because you had a feeling to turn into the store. I was like, yeah, I should go home. And I did. And I had just missed a tornado by like a minute. Completely destroyed my face. So within 61 days of each other, God spared me twice. And so I knew that I'm here for a purpose. And for me, that purpose is to help people advocate for themselves, whatever their health condition is, but especially diabetes, because that's a condition that I know most intimately. And so if you've been diagnosed with prediabetes, please, please, please figure out what your numbers are. Do your best to eat like a person with diabetes. Everybody should eat like a person with diabetes, because people with diabetes have to be more conscious about their carb to their insulin ratio. And so when you begin to have more green vegetables, more salads than potato salad, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, your body can process it. I also want to say it's important for us to cut through the noise. I was someplace and a lady said she didn't know black folk ate vegetables.
Wow.
And I was so offended by that. Because first of all, if you just understand the history of black Americans in the U.S., you wouldn't even come to that conclusion.
Mm.
Because we were not even allowed dessert. We were not even allowed meat. We had to take the scrap from the meat just to help season our kale greens, our collard greens, our mustard greens, our turnip greens.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go to these nutritionists and they're showing us vegetables that are not natural to our diet, we have to remember what vegetables are natural to our diet.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up eating okra.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've never been to a nutritionist and they have said to me, fix your plate and put some okra on it. I'm getting broccoli and asparagus. That was not native to how I grew up eating.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to remember that. You have to remember to love yourself and love your culture and love your cuisine. That's number one. Then number two, everybody can't find a new physician. I am often on these, in these workshops, and people are like, well, if you have a bad doctor, just go find another one. Yes, I agree. Find you another one if you can. But I have been in a situation where there was only one physician, diabetes specialist, within an hour drive. Mm. So not everybody has the ability to just go find another doctor. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has the energy to call around. So if you are going to stick with a doctor that doesn't see you, just know you need to show up every visit with a list of questions. And I'm going to tell you what a beautiful woman from Swaziland told me. She said when she crosses the threshold in her doctor's office, she takes her shoes off and she sits down. And she does this for a couple of reasons. Number one, every time you see your diabetes specialist, they are to check the bottom of your feet. So she does that. She crosses the threshold and she takes her shoes off as a reminder that the bottom of her feet need to be checked. Two, she does that so she can't be rushed out of the office. So you have to have those questions and you get them answered. And if your visit that is scheduled to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes goes over, we're not worried about that. Because you don't get a decrease in your bill
right.
if you leave earlier. You understand?
Right.
So we have to love ourselves enough to say, this is my 20-minute visit, and you're going to answer my question. Mm-hmm. What are the questions that you want to know? What is my A1C? When is the last time you've seen a diabetes educator? Can I see a diabetes educator? Especially if you're not seeing an endocrinologist and you are seeing a primary care physician, can they recommend you see a diabetes specialist? That's someone whose sole purpose is diabetes. Mm-hmm. Because your primary care physician, they're worried about everything else. They're checking your heart. They're worried about your cholesterol. They're doing so many other things, right? If you come in and you jam your finger, they're focusing on the finger jam. See if you can see a diabetes specialist. When is the last time you've seen a nutritionist, a dietitian? Have them write you recommendations to see a nutritionist. I go like every year because at some point we need that education again. It's not like diabetes education is one and done. Mm-hmm. No, I'm now older. I need to to figure out how to manage diabetes in this situation. I'm now a parent. I need to know how to manage it. I'm now way less or I weigh more. So the education is something that's consistent and ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say. Love yourself. Get your questions answered. When you cross that threshold, take your shoes off. Take your shoes off and get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Let the physician know you're gonna check the bottom of my feet and you're gonna answer all my questions. You are not gonna scurry me on out of here. I'm here for this visit, and I only see you every 3 months.
Right.
It's worth getting all your questions answered in that time.
Well, you answered my question, that's for sure. Thank you so very, very much. Thoughtful,
You are welcome.
provocative.
You are welcome.
Yes, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Leon. And just so you'll know, that was Leon Rock, the founder of the African American Diabetes Association.
Okay.
So we have about 5 minutes to go. The time has flown by. The information was flowing. And again, if you're listening and you have that last minute question, we have about a few minutes to get that question in. Feel free to give us a call, 617-282-0685. All right. So, Dr. Felisa, what would you have 3 out of the 5 minutes? What would you like to close out with?
I have a motto, and my motto is diagnosed, not defeated. And I created that motto.
Say that motto again.
My motto is diagnosed, not defeated.
Diagnosed, not defeated.
And I created that motto very early on in my diagnosis because I felt hopeless. And I needed something to grab onto. And so I encourage everybody, when you are feeling down, just tell yourself you're diagnosed, you're not defeated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to get in there and fight. You have to get in there and do something today. There is something called diabetes distress, diabetes burnout, when people just get tired of managing diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in that phase, just find you one thing to do today. Just say, okay, I'm going to check my blood sugar after breakfast. I found checking my blood sugar first thing in the morning at some point in time was depressing me because it was setting the tone for my day. So if it was a good number, then I'd be like, yes. But then if it was too high, I'd be like, oh, man.
Right.
And, like, now my whole day is, like, off. So I started checking after breakfast, right? Just so that I could get up into my praise and worship space and then have my good meal, enjoy it, and then check.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say just find you one thing today and then build on that tomorrow. Say, okay, I can eat more vegetables today, eat by the plate method. I didn't really get into that, but maybe another call I can. But the plate method and carb counting are helpful ways for people to eat with diabetes. And it's so possible. It's just so possible. Sometimes we think things are impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to encourage anybody. It is possible to manage diabetes. It is possible to live a healthy life with diabetes. And sometimes the only stories we hear are those bad stories of, dialysis and amputation and death and all of that. But it's possible to live a healthy life with diabetes. And I don't think we hear that enough. And the last thing I'll say for this part is it's not your fault. We don't hear that enough. It is not your fault. We all ate the same school lunches growing up. It is not your fault. You didn't cause your diabetes. It's here now and you have to manage it. So just focus on managing it. Don't worry about how you got it and all of this stuff. It's here, manage it, and it's not your fault. It is not your fault.
Wow, this has been incredible. I'm so pleased to have had this opportunity to be able to have this broadcast, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you, Dr. DeRose. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And thank you for being with us for another series of Healing Our Land's Black and Diabetes in Boston. Airs every second Tuesday of the month from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., as well as join us for our community workshop that will happen every fourth Tuesday of the month, and that's from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. at UCB at 1544 Columbus Avenue. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Eric. God bless you, and we'll see you the next time.
Take care.